Welcome to Page to Screen, the podcast where Nikki and Christina discuss books that were turned into movies and films that were adapted from books. As always, we do remind you that spoilers lay ahead. Now, we invite you to decide with us the age-old question, which is better, the book or the movie?
Hey everybody, welcome back to Page to Screen. Second episode of the new year. Whoop whoop. We're still here.
So that's a plus.
Yeah. How you doing, Christina?
I am great, Nikki. How are you?
I am so much better than
I know.
the last episode.
I needed a palate cleanser, and this is exactly what the doctor ordered.
This was perfect. I'm so glad you picked this because, like I said at the end of the last episode, I was like, I read a murder book to cleanse my brain from that last one. This was chef's kiss. Mwah. Wonderful.
Yeah, I needed some eyes to get gouged out to get the bad taste of Richard from Texas out of my mouth.
So for those of you who don't know, this episode is The Birds. Caw-caw.
Yeah, it's The Birds, written by Daphne du Maurier. Did I say that right?
I think so. It's
Okay.
French.
Well,
It sounds about
We'll
right.
go with that. It was published in 1952. It's a short story, so it's not very long. It takes place in Britain shortly after World War II. It follows a male protagonist, a wounded veteran who is working on a farm with his family. He notices He notices some suspicious-looking birds congregating, and then they start attacking.
Yeah, so, just a normal Saturday if you're at the beach. No, I have seen the movie version of The Birds like 100,000 times. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who have seen it, at least once. But the short story I've never read. And I know that Daphne also wrote Rebecca,
Right.
which is also another Alfred Hitchcock film, and a Netflix movie. So I was very excited to read this one. And honestly, I got to the end of it and I thought I had pages missing.
I did too. I got to the ending and I thought, well, surely that's not it. And the copy that I have is a vintage copy. So I looked at the page numbers to see if perhaps there were some missing because it is like a little bit beat up.
Yeah.
Nope. That's the ending.
It literally just ends. There is no, and honestly, I find that to be so much more unsettling than it actually having an ending.
The movie isn't really that different with the ending either because it's pretty ambiguous of whether or not, they survive.
Yeah. And that's okay. So let's dive into the short story. So as you know, he's working on a farm on this island. He sees some weird bird things. What I found interesting about this is that it starts basically immediately.
Yeah.
Whereas, with the movie, we have all this like backstory stuff in San Fran, blah, blah, blah. This is like, he's outside, he goes inside, and I think it starts at night, he's sleeping. And it's almost like the Telltale Heart, where he hears this constant like pecking at the window. And it was like, oh, okay, that's really spooky.
You know what? It reminded me of the part in the older Salem's Lot miniseries when it's the kid floating outside of the window and he's tapping at the glass. It's so creepy.
Yeah. That's basically what it was. I was unnerved reading this book. Like I was not, it's so short. Like you can read it really quickly, but I was so bothered by it. And this is something that I told Christina about this earlier. We've had an issue since we've had like snow in New York and stuff like that, where the birds are all coming back. And we had an issue where Jesse and I didn't take our AC unit in for the longest time. We finally brought it in, but there used to be a bird that would land on our AC unit and just like fly away. And I think we confused it, and it sits on the armature that you put on your window for the AC unit to sit on, and it started pecking at the screen on our window. So I'm reading this short story, and I can hear this like tap, 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 tap. And I'm at that part right at the beginning where it's like the constant tapping noise, and I fling the curtain open, and there's a bird there, and I was like, I can't. I was like, I quit. I quit the book. I quit it. I'm like throwing the book on the floor. I'm like, I can't do this anymore.
It's really creepy. I was expecting it to be a little bit more bland, perhaps, but it's genuinely terrifying.
And what I like about the short story, because there's not really much we can pull from the short story, because it is so short. It's not like this feels a lot shorter than the only other short story we talked about, An Old-Fashioned Thanksgiving. And the action moves a lot faster in this.
Well, there is action.
Yeah.
Things happen in it.
Hey, a kid almost got shot in that last one, so that was action.
No, it's like a whole season of Walking Dead condensed into 30 pages or something?
Yeah, or less, depending on how big your font is. Like, I think mine felt like it was like maybe 20 pages.
Yeah. Yeah, mine I think it comes out to 60 pages, but the font's definitely bigger.
Yeah. There was like, what is interesting about this is that it's so tied to Russia.
I know.
The short story. Every time when people start to notice the issues with the birds, people are like, oh, maybe the birds are diseased, or maybe, maybe they're confused by fog or whatever. Their immediate thought is like, is this from Russia? And I was like, it really took me a moment to remember when it was published. And I was like, oh, okay, so this makes sense why people would be so scared of it.
Yeah, when I first started reading it, I thought that it took place in like turn of the century or early 1900s, but then he's talking about cars and Russia. So I looked up when it was supposed to take place, and yeah, it's got that kind of paranoia.
Yeah, and then the fact that they're constantly listening to the radio, and you find out like it's happening all over the UK.
Yeah.
Like it's happening in London, it's happening, everywhere, and they tell people, as opposed to in the movie where there's a classic scene in the movie where they don't believe what's happening. As opposed to that, in the book, the radio announcer literally tells them, like, stay home, board up your windows, do whatever you can, do not leave your house.
Where we find ourselves right now with COVID-19, it just felt so like you're reading exactly what's happening, because the main character warns his neighbors about it, and they're all told to stay inside and to board up, and people don't listen. They're literally like anti-birders. They don't think it's going to happen. And
anti-birders.
He when he goes out to kind of survey the damage, his neighbors are dead.
Yeah. His neighbors are dead, and the birds are doing some really weird stuff. Like, there's the part in the short story where his house is getting attacked by all these birds, and then I think he's outside, and the birds just fold up their wings and fall down dead.
Yeah. And
just like visually thinking about that, I was like, what would I do if I saw that?
I know.
Like, I don't think there's a therapist who can talk me through what I just saw.
Right. Yeah, and it's kind of cool because it takes over 3 or 4 nights. So
yeah,
the first night it's a little tapping, and then it's a small attack, but then the attacks get bigger and bigger. So it's only like maybe 4 or 5 days that it takes place over, and the attacks just keep getting more and more aggressive. So at first he's able to just close the window, but then he puts the boards on the outside of the window. Oh no, he puts the boards on the inside of the windows and thinks that it's going to protect them. But then the next day, all the glass is gone.
Yeah.
And then they're actually like their beaks are going through the boards. So then they have to all congregate inside of their kitchen.
Yeah, so they can keep the fire in the fireplace going.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love the part where he's outside and all those bodies are like littered everywhere, and he starts using the dead bodies of the birds to insulate in front of the wood.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is just so, it is so insane to me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a really neat, like, there's really no explanation. There's never an explanation as to why, which, you know,
like
makes
that.
it scarier.
Right.
But there's something about the tides. Like, when the tide comes in, that's when they, like, attack. And, you know, living, like, you lived in Florida near the water. I lived in Florida near the water. I lived in Massachusetts near the water. If you look at a tide chart, do you know how long that tide comes in for? Like, it's hours. Like, you're inside of your house constantly listening to what I imagine it would be like. The closest thing we could think of is like hail, like a hailstorm for 4 hours. And then it just suddenly stops. And except when you leave your house, it's not hail you see, it's a bunch of dead birds.
Well, it reminded me of a hurricane when the last one that was really bad here, and it's my husband and our dog in one of the bathrooms, and all you hear is just stuff hitting the top of the roof and the wind. So you just have to sit there and wait and listen to it.
I think that's the stuff that drives you crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, 'cause you get to a point where there's literally nothing you can do.
And I like that. And in the book, he realizes that the more that they don't do anything, the more that, because he has kids and a wife, that they're going to start panicking. So he's constantly telling his wife, oh, go make breakfast. Can you please make me cocoa?
Yeah.
You know, you guys should be doing things. That way we're not just sitting here.
Yeah. Like, that's how I've been when quarantined during COVID. That's why we learned to bake bread. That's why we, you know, marathon TV shows. Because if you're not doing something, you're just thinking about the thing that you can't control.
Right.
And I think that's why the ending of the book was just so infuriating for me, because I want to know. I honestly thought the short story was going to end slightly more similar to the movie, where I thought that he was going to get his family off of the island somehow.
Right.
And it's almost like we end the book in the middle of a sentence.
Yeah.
Because the last line in the book is him throwing his empty cigarette packet into the fire.
And watching it burn.
Yeah, and that's it. And I feel like it's very much like he's facing the firing squad at that point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, he's got his last, like, so I guess my question for you is, if it were to continue, if there were another line after that, do you think they actually survived?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah, me either.
Aw.
I know. It's just with the finality of that, with the idea that he is having his last cigarette, it just reminded me so much of facing a firing squad, because that's something that they would do, right? Like, that's at least in the movies, that's what they do. I've never seen a firing squad in real life, people. Excuse me for being so naive about firing squads. Never seen one. Don't want to. But he's smoking that cigarette, and it's just like, oh, you know, like, you feel the weight of it all.
It reminded me, did you ever read I Am Legend?
No, but I did see the movie.
The book is really great. Actually, we should do it on
I think it's on the list somewhere.
I think so too. The I Am Legend, the book, is really good. And there's kind of like this same attitude from the main character where he understands what he's up against and is just trying to be as organized as possible, trying to compartmentalize his fears with what he needs to do. So there's just like this constant, okay, So I need to go milk this cow. I have to put up the boards. I have to get these birds collected over here for more protection. So he's just constantly doing this stuff for survival. But you just feel like this dread the whole time that no matter how hard he fights against this force, he's not going to win.
Yeah.
If I Am Legend were to stop, if Richard Matheson concluded the book at an earlier chapter, I would feel the same way. Like, even though I don't know what happens to this main character, he's not going to make it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think he was making it. Which makes me sad because, he's got the kids. He's got 2 kids and a wife.
Yeah.
But seeing what happened to his neighbors and seeing that they are so remote on this island, like, it was like they had to walk a while to get to the neighbor's house to steal all that stuff from their neighbor.
Right.
And honestly, I'm surprised they didn't take the cow home.
Why didn't the birds attack the cows?
I never thought of that.
I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Because they're another species owned by man?
Oh, maybe. So they're in the club.
Yeah. They're like, oh, we see you. Good job, cows. And the cows are like, milk me.
There is like a thing about humanity coexisting with animals that in 1952, it's interesting, but looking at where we're at now with how industrial we treat our food supplies and what we're doing to the planet, that I feel that it's even more poignant now.
Yeah. I feel like now we're heading for like an Animal Farm situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when you think about it, back then everything was literal hands-on. Like,
right.
you milked the cow, you raised and slaughtered the animals. Now it's like we've got a machine for that.
I know. It's a bummer.
Real bummer.
I did like, because with the birds at first, as I'm reading it, where the birds are coming in, it reminded me a little bit of like an H.P. Lovecraft type vibe, which is problematic because it's the whole thing where in all of his stories, the monsters it's a very nationalist kind of collection where all of the monsters are foreign, so they're foreigners, be afraid of them. And he specifically points out, because he's telling everybody like, hey, look, this crazy thing happened with the birds last night. And they go, oh, were they foreign birds? And he says, no, they were from here. And he lists out all of the local birds that they have. So she makes it very clear that it's not an H.P. Lovecraft type situation. Yeah.
It's more like the enemy is, it's like the calls are coming from inside the house.
Right. Coming from the house.
But yeah, everybody he talks to about it is very quick to dismiss it as almost not their problem, because there's the helicopter or the airplane that comes to try and to save them, and he knows it's going to fail. He's like, those birds are just going to dive in, and they did. And then there's like the ship.
So scary.
And then the people going out to try and shoot the birds themselves.
Yeah.
I'm like, everyone was so quick to be like, it is nothing, until it was something. And, oh my God, we just read a COVID book. Thanks, Christina. We read the book about COVID. Somebody's going to listen to this podcast and be like, you know what'll make a great COVID movie? The Birds.
Yeah.
A remake.
It's that same type of panic where he says, I have to tell somebody. But who's he going to tell? Who's going to take care of this for him?
Yeah. Nobody. It's something, and it's almost like it is like an invisible force. We don't know what's causing it. We just know that it's there. And there's really nothing we can do to stop it.
Yeah.
Well, that's a downer. I thought this one was going to take an uptick after last week's episode.
I do like I think it's the second night. It doesn't matter. So I think it's the second night, but where he's trying to calm down his family, and he's like, oh, it's okay. we'll figure this out. And I think the sister's like, but they tried to pluck out Johnny's eyes. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah. I know. It's just, it makes me rethink a lot of the time I've spent at the beach. Like, yeah, I've got this bird in my backyard right now that's probably going to find a way into my apartment and kill me at some point. But
It's coming after you.
it
sir.
is. They're coming to get you, Barbara. But it's, like, we both went to the beach in Florida. Do you know how many seagulls are at the beach? Like,
A lot.
I constantly think about being in Massachusetts, and it's just like Seagull City, because like where I'm from in Massachusetts is a fishing port, so there's a lot of fish, and there's a lot of birds. Let me tell you, these birds don't play around. If those birds in Massachusetts were to gang up and fight you, oh yeah, listen, give me wings. I'm a bird now. Caw, please don't hurt me. I'm one of you.
Yeah, and it's scary too, where the birds that are attacking are, yeah, like seagulls, they're smaller birds, but then he realizes that the birds of prey are coming. So it's
Yeah.
the hawks, and they have more power behind what they can do. So it almost feels like in a video game, like the boss fight, like
Yeah.
the boss is coming, and there's no way you're going to be able to win against him.
It's it's something that they don't really touch upon in the book, but they do in the movie with the ornithologist. It is interesting, the birds that are attacking, because they're all attacking together, and it's almost like the seagulls are the leaders because
Right.
they're the ones who are watching from the water, and it's like seagulls and hawks would never hang out. This is like the Jets and the Sharks in West Side Story. They're not friends,
Yeah.
but they all have one common enemy.
Yeah.
I know.
Scary.
I really liked it though. Like, honest to goodness, it bothered me so much that I things like books and movies that have something happen in them that really bother me, I end up thinking about way too much. Like Parasite. Every time I
Yeah.
see an automatic light, I automatically assume there's somebody in a basement turning that light on for me. I'm like, oh my God. Spoiler alert. For anyone who hasn't. Sorry, everybody. Spoiler alert. But
Bruce Willis was a ghost the whole time, guys.
what? Really?
No.
So
no,
that's
no,
how he
I
lived in Die
completely-
Hard.
Every movie, ghost. No, Moonlighting, ghost.
Ghost.
No.
He was
the-
a ghost
the
in
part that
Ghost, but they cut him.
The part that I've been thinking about, and you mentioned it, is the helicopter crash in the book, where they hear the helicopters, so they're excited that maybe they'll do something, but he knows that the birds will go after them, and then he hears that there's no more helicopter.
Yeah.
So he knows that the helicopter crashed, but he's not saying that because he doesn't want to say it out loud to scare his wife and kids, and it's just like, oh, it's so creepy.
Yeah. It's reading the short story, it's definitely like an allegory for war. Which is definitely not what's going on in the movie. At least I don't think it is.
Yeah.
I have my own thoughts about what's going on in the movie, but I definitely don't think it has anything to do with war with Russia.
No, it does not. This is the first of Daphne du Maurier's writings that I have read, and now I'm very intrigued into reading more of what she's done.
Yeah, if she has more stories that are, well, I mean, she has Rebecca, which is naturally. Now that's a story. I haven't read that one yet, but I've seen like the movies, and I'm just like, girl, what?
Have you ever? Because I didn't realize that she wrote "Don't Look Now." Have you seen that movie?
Yes.
That's nuts, right?
Yes. Which we should talk. We should just do a whole
Yeah.
Oh, we're coming for you, Daphne, just like we did Louisa May Alcott. I'm ready.
No,
2020 was Louisa May Alcott. 2021 is all Daphne.
I was reading about her and about how she did not like, she liked Rebecca. She did not like the Birds adaptation that Hitchcock did. And then she said that her favorite one that was a remake or, an adaptation was Don't Look Now. And I just watched that this year. So I'm like, what? I didn't realize that she did that.
Yeah, Don't Look Now. I really do love that movie.
I hated it.
What? Why?
I thought it was weird. I'm like, it's what it all boils down to. It's a little person.
Okay. Spoiler alert.
Oh, whoops.
I love Donald Sutherland though, like in that movie, that hair, that mustache.
Yeah, and the sex scene in that movie is nuts.
Yeah, that is crazy. I see. This is why we have to read the book, because is that in the book?
Well, that's what I was curious about because I thought that it's such a good adaptation. I'm like, well, does she include in the book where Donald Sutherland like puts Julie Christie in a headlock during sex? Like, I gotta read this. This is crazy.
That's exactly what she wrote. And then Donald Sutherland, a man who hasn't been born yet.
Yeah, a man with 70s fro hair puts his wife in a headlock.
Okay, that's coming. Spoiler alert, we're gonna do that one at some point soon. I think that's on the list too. We have a long master list, everybody. I think that's on it.
I shouldn't say I hated it, but maybe when we do it and I rewatch it, I'll enjoy it more.
Yeah, I think once we read the book.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I've seen The Birds like thousands of times. Like, I love Hitchcock films. I love talking about Hitchcock. He's a problematic person. Don't get me wrong. Setting that aside, his films bring they're just really good until we get to Family Plot, but we're not going to talk about that one. We can forget that happened. It's like The Godfather Part 3. But like
I don't know her.
Yeah. I don't know her. But when you think about like Psycho and Rear Window, my God, like The Birds is just like a classic film, and I don't think I really took the time to dig into it as much until I read the short story.
Yeah, same. And The Birds is actually, I'm pretty positive that The Birds was the very first Hitchcock movie that I watched. And I was a kid when I watched it. I think my mom showed it to me. And I gotta say, out of all of them, out of all the big ones, I probably have only seen The Birds maybe 4 or 5 times. So the time that I watched it for this, it's been a while. It's been probably a good 10 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I know. It surprised me too.
Every time Turner Classic Movies does like a Hitchcock weekend, I watch it. I can't not. Like,
yeah, the last time I watched it was actually, I remember it specifically because it was when my husband Carlos and I were in New York City for New York Comic Con, and he had a table there, and I caught only like maybe the last half of it. So it wasn't a full watch from beginning to end. So like when I started watching it this time around, I forgot what a nut job Tippi Hedren is in it. I was like, oh, she's certified freak.
Yeah. It's crazy. I think that's funny that you watched this movie when that's the last time we saw each other in person, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, that was like 100 years ago.
I was a different person.
I'm a ghost now. But it's funny that you would watch it like while you're on vacation, because the first time I can remember seeing a Hitchcock film was Psycho when I was we went to Universal Studios. I remember this like clear as day. My family was on vacation and we went to Universal Studios. And we saw it in a hotel room, but it was in Spanish. And I was scared to use the shower because the shower at the hotel had white shower curtains. And I wouldn't get in there. I was like, oh, no. Oh, no, this is how I die. And that was back when they had the Do you remember when Universal Studios had the Alfred Hitchcock Presents stage show and they would redo the shower scene?
Yes.
I saw that like the very next day and I was like, no, like I'm good. And they used to have the Psycho House where they have like the Barney Playland now.
I know. I thought you were going to. That's what I thought you were going to say because I do remember all of that.
Yeah, I missed that.
I do too.
I was scared. I was certifiably just like a wreck. We also watched The People Under the Stairs in Spanish because we couldn't get into
Why are you watching this stuff in Spanish?
because it was like midnight and we couldn't find the remote. Like I'm like real young at this point, like maybe 5 or 6 when we went to Universal. But yeah, so
now I'm just picturing Norman Bates running into the house like madre, madre.
But let me tell you, sounds the same in Spanish and in English. So
Oh well. Going into the movie, The Birds was released in 1963, obviously directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It stars Rod Taylor and Tippi Hedren. And this was his follow-up to Psycho. This is like shortly after that one. So he had big shoes to fill.
Oh, yeah. I think Psycho really put him on a pedestal. And everything after that was just like, how can I terrorize another blonde woman?
I think he got into his own head, and on top of it, the fact that, because here's the thing, Hollywood embraced him and also shunned him.
Yeah.
So he never got what he felt he deserved with like Oscars, and the critics were always mixed over his stuff. So I think he felt that, well, I've already accomplished so much, but I'm not getting any type of recognition for it, so why bother?
Yeah. I feel like at that time, well, like even now, we are a culture that we love horror. We love suspense. We love being on the edge of our seats. But even when it's as beautifully done as some of Hitchcock's works were, we still don't recognize until it's too late the artistry that went into it, and we don't recognize it and honor it the way it should.
Right.
Like,
right.
Even just thinking about like Get Out, which I still think is like it's gorgeously shot. It is balls to the wall insane. And I think that we don't honor these films enough because they're kind of like lowbrow. Because it's horror. It's not a sophisticated period piece.
Yeah.
You know? It's no Bridgerton on Netflix.
No, you're right. And you look at the Academy, and it's like they gave The Silence of the Lambs an Oscar. So they just point to that for the next, few decades. Like, well, see, we do. And it's like, well, that's not even a full horror movie. Same thing for Parasite winning. They're pointing to that like, oh, look, a horror movie finally won. It's like, well, that's not even really a true horror to me. That's suspense.
Yeah, it's psychological.
Yeah.
Those are the things that live rent-free in my brain. But honest to goodness, horror films, I don't think will ever get the recognition that they deserve when they're done in such like, I'm not saying Scream should have won an Oscar. I mean, maybe it should have. I really love that movie. But I do think that Alfred Hitchcock, even though he was a problematic director, he still deserved a little bit more recognition than he was given.
Sure. And even because there's a lot of information now about his treatment of Tippi during the making of this movie and then Marnie. And after that occurred, she still went to his Lifetime Achievement Award. She still went to his funeral. She still talked positively about him. And then finally it was her talking to a biographer, Donald Spoto, and she finally was honest with what happened and between the sexual harassment, the physical violence that she experienced during The Birds at the hand of Hitchcock. And she was asked, well, why did you still talk positively about him? And she said, because he's a genius.
Yeah.
You know, and she's like, I can put aside how I experienced my professional career with him, with the fact that he was a genius. He was just this epic filmmaker. So that both of those things are true at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, she's a lot stronger than I am because she had a hole ripped in her lower eyelid
Yep.
during filming because he was literally I just want to be a fly on the wall when they were filming this scene, because they're literally in the attic scene when she goes upstairs to the attic. Hitchcock had stagehands literally just chucking birds at her. Just like real live birds. Not like it's not like I went to Michael's and I bought like fake birds. Like these are legit seagulls that he has just like tossed it like a football at her face. And that's what they did. Like I wouldn't have been able to handle that.
I'm laughing. It's really not funny.
No, it's not. It's bad.
It's just so horrible. I don't know how else to respond to it. That they had these birds and they were like tying little like fishing wire wire like around their little tiny bird feet, and then attaching that to her suit so that she couldn't run away from them, and then throwing birds at her face. It's so horrible for a whole week.
Yeah, that's the thing that gets me too, is that they had to shoot that scene for a week, and I'm like, the trauma of doing that over and over and over again, I would have cracked. I would have been like, listen, I'm done. And she still went back to work with him. Like,
yeah, and to give like the background of it, he had his relationship with Grace Kelly, and then she leaves.
Yeah.
So he's real butthurt about that, and he wanted a new Grace Kelly, and it's sort of like getting into a bad relationship, a breakup, and then you just try to get someone who's better than your ex. So he finds Tippy, who doesn't have experience acting, and at this point she's already like 30 or something.
Yeah.
And he basically vertigos her. He gets Edith Head to design clothing for her to wear, like just out and about. He teaches her about wine and food and takes her under his wing. And then he comes on to her. He gives her, these sexual advances, and she's just saying no.
Yeah.
And the way that scene is shot and shown, it feels very rapey.
Yeah. It's abusive. It's very, very abusive.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah. Now that we're talking about the movie, I guess we should mention that there are some big differences between the short story and the movie. The short story, it's all in London. It's on a little island, like off of Cornwall. This all takes place in California. The opening starts in San Fran, and then we move to the Bay. And once again, it's about the seclusion of kind of being like alone, because our main male character, Mitch, his family lives in this beautiful farmhouse that you can either get to by one main road or by boat. I'm like, cool. Could you put him any farther out?
Yeah.
Hitchcock, great. And we meet Tippy, Melanie Daniels, when she's trying to pick up a bird at the most beautiful pet store I have ever seen. Like, this pet store is gorgeous. They got a whole floor dedicated to birds upstairs. I'm like, okay. And apparently she's like a socialite. She's like the Paris Hilton. Everyone knows her business. She's always in the papers. And she meets Mitch, who is kind of a dick.
Yeah.
Like, Mitch meets her in that pet store, knows exactly who she is, and yeah, he says that he was there for those birds. He doesn't buy the birds when he's there. He just sees her go into the pet store, and then he's like, I'm gonna screw with her.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me so mad, because he's really the only main male character in the whole movie.
Which is a nice refreshing change.
Yeah. Well, it's nice and refreshing if you don't think about the undertones to the film that Hitchcock put in place.
Yep.
So, God, Hitchcock. So they kind of have this flirtatious thing that happens in San Fran. And Tippy, as Melanie, gets real cray-cray, as Christina mentioned, and basically follows him out to the bay to his mom's house.
She looks out and gets his driver's license. Then she gets his information and then follows him. And it's hours. It's like a long way away. So she drives all the way out there, and she's got these two lovebirds that she wants to deliver to him. Then she gets to the island, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, you gotta, as you said, it's the drive over or a boat. And then she's like actually like motoring herself out to his house. And
Yeah.
I forgot all of that. So I'm watching it like, she's crazy.
Yeah, I forgot that she didn't really know him. Like,
No.
I was like, this makes you crazy, right?
Yeah.
This makes you a stalker. And then on top of that, she decides, because he was going to buy those birds for his sister, she's asking everyone in town what his sister's name is. Nobody's like, why do you need that information?
Right.
Everyone's like, oh, yeah, here you go. And it's like, please, to anyone listening, if I have a child, please don't give out their name to strangers who want to give them birds. I don't want birds in my house. Don't give out their name.
She breaks into his house.
Oh, yeah. She doesn't. She just walks right in. She walks right in and leaves the birds right in the living room and walks out like, no problem.
And when he sees it, he's like, aw.
Oh, yeah. He gets his binoculars and spies on her, and it's like waving at her like, that's so sweet. And then he races her. He races her back to the dock because it's so small and there's only one road he can go. And that's when the first attack happens. She gets hit directly in the head with a seagull.
I do like, though, the shot where she is in the boat and then she's seeing the long pan of him running out of the house, getting in the car, driving out. That's like the kind of Hitchcock that I love.
Yeah. And it's just like it's like a beauty shot. It's a perfect.
Yeah.
And it's so unobstructed. There's nothing there.
Nope.
Which also lends itself to the whole idea that you are truly alone with a man you don't really know, that you stalked to his mom's house.
Speaking of the mom, okay.
Is her name Lydia? Is that her name? The mom's
I think
name?
so.
Yeah.
Are they fucking? The vibe that you get between Mitch and his mom.
It's very Oedipus, right?
It is. It is.
I think it's because here's the deal with Mitch. Mitch, while it is refreshing that we only have one male lead, because basically everything that we've really talked about up to this point has been very like male heavy. We only have one male lead here, and I don't think that, like, I know him and his mom are not full-on Oedipus Rexing, but I think that she is the overprotective mother. Like, you know how in Psycho we had what we thought was an overprotective mother, which turned out to be, spoiler alert, a dead body and him pretending to be his mother, who probably was overprotective. We never got a chance to meet her, so we don't know if what Norman was saying to himself was actually things that his own mother would say or his own internal monologue about the feelings he was having.
Yeah.
But that's another day. But I feel like Hitchcock has really stuck with the idea of the overprotective, problematic mother. And I think that is what's happening here, is that Lydia, we find out that Mitch, his dad is dead, and it's just Mitch and his younger sister and his mom. And then his crazy ex-girlfriend who lives in town now. And it's a very small female community that surrounds themselves around Mitch, and then, you know, Melanie pops up. And it's very much like throwing a rock into, oh, this is going to sound so stupid. It's like throwing a rock at a pile of birds and watching them scatter.
Yeah.
She is the rock and he's the food that they were trying to eat.
I feel like it's very Freudian for Hitchcock because Hitchcock was married to Alma Hitchcock, and they worked together on his movies. And the way that the mom and the ex-girlfriend, I mean, they kind of even look a little bit like her, and they have the darker hair, and they're tied to him, and he is then looking at Tippy. I don't know. It just feels like, you know, there's always the thing where Hitchcock thought that he was Cary Grant, and Rod Taylor is so obviously just a cheaper Cary Grant.
Yeah.
So it's him clearly imagining that he is just this perfect Hollywood hunk guy, and he's got Alma at his side, but he's lusting after Tippy. And I don't know, it's just weird.
It's very weird. It's very, very weird. Yeah, I just, the dynamic that Hitchcock puts forth in this film reads to me like, it's almost like a manifestation of a hysterical female.
Yes.
Because, and you can look at that in two different ways. You can look at it as an actual hysterical female, or that the birds are the manifestation of the hysteria.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that with the idea that birds is slang for women.
Yeah. I was thinking about that too because it wasn't really until this recent watching of it for the podcast that I realized that we only have one real male lead. I always assumed there was more because there are scenes like they're at the restaurant and there are men at the restaurant, you know, but we really only have Mitch and the women who surround him, or we could call them the birds. His mom and his sister who depend on him, the ex-girlfriend who he actually met her in San Francisco, and she loves him so much, even though she's his ex, that she moved to the same town to be around his mom.
Creepy.
To be friends with his mom. Super creepy. You know, and then we have Melanie who comes in. And it's like this gravitational pull towards him, and these are his birds. It's almost like he's collecting them. He also even mentions at the bird store to Melanie, he's like, oh, leave your gilded cage.
Right.
Basically already putting her in the position of the bird itself. But I know.
We see what you're doing, Hitchcock. We see right through you.
Yeah, we picked it up and we put it down and we don't want to look at it anymore. We're not hysterical. We're perfectly hysterical. We're under-hysterical.
I'm not hysterical. I'm hysterical.
Deal with it. If anything, we're under-hysterical. We're not hysterical enough. So after Melanie goes super cray-cray and stalks him and stuff, she gets attacked by the bird, which I took that as a warning. You know what I mean? Like, even though later on you find out, like, she gets attacked on, later on they say it's a Saturday. She's only there for like 3 days, really, like the whole weekend. But everybody in town blames the attacks on her later. But you find out that a fishing boat was attacked the week before. Right. So it's almost like how did Hitchcock really want us to see it? I still see that first attack as like a warning, like, hey girl, you should leave. Like, don't go back to that island. You should go home. You did your thing, now leave.
Yeah.
Because she meets the mom right after the attack, because the mom is in town with his sister, and the looks that she is
Yeah.
giving Melanie, because you don't realize that the mom, who I think is Lydia, you don't realize that Lydia knows information about Melanie, because Melanie's in all those gossip magazines and stuff, because we find out, like, there's a story about her diving naked into a fountain in Italy, which no one ever believes her when she says that she was pushed fully clothed, which is another thing that points to, like, you know, female hysteria and, like, gaslighting and all this stuff that happens to women.
I really liked that part, because when she gets attacked by the birds, there's clearly like a rapey thing going on there, but I forgot that people aren't believing her.
Yeah.
And it's like they're not believing her with who she is, and they're not believing her with the whole birds thing, and they think it's her fault.
Well, and it's not only they don't believe her, no man in this movie believes a woman at all, which,
No.
because Mitch invites her to dinner that night at his mom's house, and his mom is calling, like, the farmer that she buys her feed from and telling him, like, your feed is bad, my chickens won't eat. And he's like, well, maybe you have picky chickens. And she's like, no, my chickens will eat anything. And it's like, it all goes back to that, like, men will not believe any of the women in this movie.
Right.
Like, they're basically saying what's happening. It's like they could be standing right in front of them, holding the bird, being like, this thing's gonna bite you. And then it bites him, and he's like, oh, I don't think so. It's like, what? Because even after the party, so after dinner, she gets invited to the little girl's birthday party. Cynthia? Whatever her name is. Gets invited to the girl's birthday party. The birds attack all the kids at the birthday party, which is scary. And then that night, like, while they're cleaning up, I guess, all the stuff from the birthday party, those finches or whatever make their way down the fireplace and straight into the room, which is always just like I think that that's one of the scariest scenes, because she sees that little bird.
The chimney.
Yeah.
Yeah. I jumped.
Oh yeah, because the lovebirds that she had dropped off are making some weird noises, and then they kind of stop, and then you hear a louder noise, and Tippy sees that tiny little bird, and she turns to say Mitch, and then the whole room is filled with birds. I was like, oh, no. I'm good. I don't need this. But then the police officer doesn't believe them.
I liked that part. It's done really well. And that part, there is something in the short story where when he is preparing the house, he does all this stuff and he forgets the fireplace.
Yeah.
So he forgets to light the fire, so they start coming in through the chimney. But then it's done, like, so much more epic in the movie. It's super scary.
Oh yeah. Like, that's something you would, like, it made me glad that I don't have a fireplace in my apartment. Who knows what would have happened to me if that bird. But that's when the attacks start to get worse, and those are small birds too that attack them. Then you have the next morning when Lydia goes to visit the farmer who she bought the feed from. And the thing that bothers me about this is there's a guy who works on that farm. And he's just doing his business. He's just working, and he's like, oh yeah, he's probably still inside. Did you not go inside the house to find out where your boss was? Because he's dead with his eyes gouged out.
Yeah.
Like, why? It's funny because I never noticed that guy was still working. Like,
he's dedicated. He's got a job to do, Nikki.
Apparently.
It's going to do itself.
Like, he's just, like, pushing that barrel around, and I'm like, what do you...
He's the meme that this is fine.
Yeah. It's like, I don't want to be involved. He's like, I don't care for the drama. But every attack from then gets worse and worse and worse. You know, because then we have the attack on the school.
The school is so good. What Hitchcock does with suspense is just, it's bar none. I mean, like, I think about some of my favorite moments of his and the way that he is able to take his time and just increase that anxiety and internal dread in these scenes. I mean, like, one of them that I think is so good is the next movie he does with Tippy, which is Marnie. And you've seen that movie, right?
Oh my God, I love Marnie.
Okay, you know the part when it's the, like, cleaner and then she's got the stolen stuff and it's just like that, that, like, long shot and you're just waiting for her to get discovered, but she's not. It's stuff like that, and then the way that you've got the schoolhouse with that annoying song, and then you see more and more birds going onto the playground. Oh, it's so good.
And she's just sitting there the whole time. That's the part that gets me, is that she's just like sitting there smoking her cigarette.
Yeah.
And you can hear the fluttering. And that's something else that we should point out. There is no music. There is no score for this film. The only sound you really have is the fluttering of the bird wings, and it is terrifying.
It's so scary. It's so scary.
Like, I'm so used to, like, even Psycho had music to it. Like, there's a theme to Psycho. Mm-hmm. There is no theme to the birds. There's nothing. It's just like, and you're like, you're like, what was that? And it's like,
I'm sorry. Can I please get a cut of the birds, but all of the sound effects are done by you? And by the way, my husband Carlos was doing that too during the movie. He was going like, caw, like he was so can you two please just redo the sound effects?
Yeah. Run, children, run. Caw. Hey guys, I do Foley work now, so. Oh no, the parrots are attacking too.
No, I can't think of another sound effect that scares me like this.
Yeah, I don't think there is one. I think Hitchcock really solidified terror with just that little bit of flapping.
Yeah.
Like, even now, like, I don't know about you, but like, if you hear curtains blowing in the wind, it kind of sound like those bird wings from the movie, and it's just like, hold on, who's there? Like,
yeah.
So that soft, like, what's going on? Who's in my house? Well, I guess the only other thing that would instill that kind of terror in me is the sound of a mouse.
Aw, well, you have your own PTSD from that.
Oh, yeah, I got so much. I got, you know what? I'm going to rewrite the birds and just call it the mice. It'd be so much worse. Oh, wait, there was a movie. It's Ben.
Well, Ben, and then the Crispin Glover.
Oh, Willard?
Yeah.
Yeah. Girl, I know my mice movies. From Cinderella to
Don't
Willard.
Get me started at Stuart Little.
Driving a car. Now they can drive.
Did you read too that when they had the premiere that Hitchcock actually put speakers in the trees outside of the theater so that when people left the theater, they heard birds? What?
Like, because he's a dick. And you know I would have been the first one running. I would have pushed someone out of the way. You know that scene in Seinfeld when George Costanza is at that birthday party and he smells smoke and the fire alarm goes off and he goes, fire, and he pushes all those kids out of the way? That's me if I left the theater and I heard that bird sound. And like, leave me alone. Jesse would be lying on the ground all bloody because I pushed him out of the way. I'm like, I can't.
Oh, no.
I've actually had, this is so stupid, I've had 2 instances where a bird has flown at my face.
Oh, no.
Actually, once in New York, I was walking to work and a pigeon flew into the back of my head, which was not. I don't stop it. I didn't realize what had happened until I turned around and the guy in front of the bodega on the corner was like, he just flew right into you. And I was like, what? And then you just see this bird like flying off. And I was like, do I need like a tetanus? Like, what do I need to get? Like, a bird flew into my head, and I was leaving to go home. I was taking a bus home to Gloucester at the time, and I was like, what do I do? And then the other time was in Florida at Jesse's parents' house. I was sitting in the backyard reading a book, and I guess I was too quiet, and they have hawks in their backyard. And I got up to go inside, and I stood up real slow, and as soon as I looked up, a hawk was flying straight at my face. I was like, I'm never going. I have not gone into that backyard unattended since then.
When I was a kid, we were at one of the Disney resorts. I don't remember which one, but one of the Disney hotels, and at the pool, a duck flew into my mom's head and like hit her. When she was describing it to somebody, she said it was, it hurt and it was big, hard, and wet. I'm like, Mom, can you please use different descriptions for this instance?
Do you remember when Fabio got hit by that bird at Disney?
Yeah, when Fabio was on the roller coaster and then he got hit by a bird, it broke his nose, and then he had that stupid interview where he's like, the coast is dangerous, people need to know. Bird's dead, by the way. That bird's definitely.
That's my remake of the birds. It's just the bird that hit Fabio.
Have you seen that video of, I'm not a sports person, but it's the baseball game where the guy threw the ball.
Oh, when he hit the bird and the bird exploded. That's how you get rid of, that's how you save the day. That's how we get rid of them birds. Baseball.
It's so a poor word.
It's just like so, oh God, so sad.
You would think the premise of both the book and the movie that it just sounds kind of dumb.
Yeah.
Like, oh, people get attacked by birds. But both are so successful.
They are. And they both pull off a fear that honestly I didn't know I had. I didn't realize I was worried about this until I saw the movie. And then reading the book, I was like, well, no, I'm super scared of it.
Yeah.
And
I like birds too.
Yeah.
But just don't kill me.
Well, what's really scary is when you look, Alfred Hitchcock, even though he was definitely inspired by, the novel, and he really only kept two things from the book, one of them being isolation and the other one being the birds. There was actually a situation that he says really helped solidify what he wanted, and that was in there was an incident in 1960, what was it? Oh God, was it the 50s or the 60s in California where a bunch of birds ate marine life that had like poisonous. The marine life had ingested something that was poisonous, and these birds ate it and they flew into the town. And it's literally in the movie, they talk about it. When the ornithologist is saying all that stuff about, oh yeah, and then the fog confused them and they went into town with all those lights. That's basically what happened. And these birds just destroyed this whole town, and no one could figure out what it was for the longest time. And then they figured it out. When did they figure it out? Like in 2011. That's the article I read, was from 2011. There was an article published where they went back and they realized that there was something that was leaking something poisonous into the water. And the birds were eating whatever was eating that. And it made them go crazy. So the birds can happen.
Moral of the podcast is this can happen, guys.
Yeah. Look out. 2021 isn't about new year, new you. It's about get safe. Go hide. Yeah. Stay home.
No, that's so fascinating to me, though. Like those stories where the ecosystem has just one slight fuck up and then disaster occurs.
Yeah. Oh, here it is. It was algae. Bioluminescent algae. It was It was algae that was poisonous after being infected from leaky septic tanks.
See, we're destroying this planet.
Yeah, we made the birds.
We made the birds.
Do you know how, like, at the end of King Kong, like, 'twas Beauty killed the beast?
To kill the beast, yeah.
It's us. We did it. Spoiler alert for the end of King Kong, you guys.
Man, we're just destroying the whole movie industry.
Spoiler alert, Snow White marries the prince. Just thought I'd let you know. I know, right? She doesn't even know him. He doesn't even go here. Oh my God.
All of these women who don't know these guys, just talk a little bit before you start stalking them.
Seriously, just get to know them, because she doesn't even know what he does for a job until she's there and she goes, "Oh, you're a lawyer," because she asked him if he's a police officer. I was like, oh my God.
I was gonna say, I thought that maybe he mentioned that he was a lawyer at the bird shop.
Yeah, no, she finds out he's a lawyer when she's at dinner.
Okay.
At their house, because the little sister is talking about how he hangs out with all the hoods. It's like, what?
I thought that the little sister looked like Liesel from Sound of Music. Yeah.
Oh, was it her?
No.
Oh.
I looked it up.
Thank you for looking it up. But yeah, so after the attack on the school, Melanie decides to stay longer because there is immediately a scene. She calls her dad. She calls her dad at the diner, and once again, the whole historical female situation. Her dad literally says something to her, and she goes, "I'm not being hysterical. I'm telling you the truth. These birds attacked." Which, really puts hits a nail on the head there with that one. And nobody believes her in this restaurant. Like, everyone's kind of just like, ugh, really? And then the ornithologist is like, "Oh, they would never." I know birds. It's like, yeah, well, you know what? I know Disney, but if somebody saw it happen in real life, I'm going to listen to them first. Like,
yeah,
duh. And then all hell breaks loose.
Yeah. Pretty fast.
Real fast. Like, 1 minute we're all arguing about the mating of birds and how they can't all hang out together and all this stupid stuff. And then everything's on fire. Like, literally on fire. I love
that part, that with the gasoline, where you've got the gasoline, like, slowly reaching over, and then you just know it's going to end up in an explosion. And then the shot of, like, the aerial, like, kind of shot that they do of
and you see how much got destroyed.
Yeah, it's so good.
Every time I see that scene, for some reason I always think he's not going to get set on fire. I always think he's going to be like, "Oops, thanks, guys," and, like, walk away. No, every time he blows up. Every time. Like, why am I, like, having this moment where I'm like, it's like the Mandela effect or whatever, where I'm like, oh, he's going to live. And it's like, oh, no, I lied.
Did you say Mandala?
Oh, my God, I did say Mandala.
See, I shouldn't talk because I apparently cannot say congregate, but I didn't know that we were talking about the Mandala effect. Congregate and Mandala.
Those are your buzzwords, you guys. Buzzwords. But this leads up to one of my favorite scenes in the movie, when she's in that phone booth.
I love that part.
The total isolation.
Yeah.
And how you literally cannot help anyone. There's a man who runs up to the phone booth, all bloody and stuff, and she's like, I can't, like, there's nothing she can do. She can't get out. She can't let him in.
Yeah.
Like, that feeling of being so trapped. Like, it's so hard. Besides the attic scene, this is just so hard to watch.
Yeah, and when you talk about how Hitchcock will take his time, when she gets saved by Mitch, when Mitch gets her out of the phone booth, it happened so fast that I was actually confused. I'm like, well, wait a minute, how did she get out? And I had to rewind it because him opening the phone booth and taking her out, it's like half a second. It's really fast.
Yeah. And have you noticed that the birds don't really attack Mitch unless
Yeah.
she's around?
Right.
What's up on that? But also with filming that scene, even though, we know that Tippy got seriously injured in the attic scene, when they were filming the phone booth scene, it was supposed to be safety glass. And it ended up being real glass, and shards of glass went into her face.
Ugh.
And she had to have each individual shard of glass removed from her nose and cheek before they could
Man, and
continue filming.
glass hurts too. Like when if you like drop something or whatever and then you get glass, oh.
Oh, yeah, and it's like you can get shards so thin you'll never see them.
Right.
Like, this woman's face was, like, destroyed during the filming of this movie.
She's so pretty too.
She's gorgeous. She is literally a Barbie doll. They made her into a Barbie doll.
Did you see the Blob from 1988, the remake?
No, I didn't. I kind of have this feeling about, like, remakes of classic horror movies where even though they're probably better than the, what I love about, the 50s ones where it's so campy and stuff, I just can't bring myself to watch them. Was it good?
You should definitely, you should watch it. I highly recommend it. It's really good, and it's funny how close it does follow the 1958 one, but there's a really cool scene with a phone booth in the 1988 one where it's a chick getting attacked by the Blob, and it's got some parallels to, I mean, The Birds is better with the phone booth there, but just that feeling of like you're trapped, and if you leave this protection, you're donezo, but also if you stay there, you're donezo. So you're just trapped. You're just waiting for this horrible thing to happen unless, you've got your ex machina Mitch showing up.
Yeah. That's Mitch is a weird character in this whole thing because he's like we mentioned, he's surrounded by, his birds, his ladies. And he feels kind of cold.
Yeah.
Like he's not, all the women around him are very emotional, which brings about, the whole historical. I keep saying historical instead of hysterical because history has proven that women aren't hysterical. We're always hysterical. But he's surrounded by all these women who are so free with their emotions. Like Annie, his ex, is very open about how hurt she felt, but that she just couldn't leave him because she loves him. You've got this sister who cares so much about him and her mom. You have Lydia, the mom, who is a tyrannical matriarch of the family. And then you have Tibby, who's just like trying to hold herself together. And then you have Mitch, who's just like nothing.
I'm a really big Cary Grant fan, and I just feel like when you look at Rod Taylor, he's just so obviously budget Cary Grant that I wasn't really digging him. And even the way he talks to his mom and calls her dear and darling, if that was coming out of Cary Grant's mouth, I would feel different about it, but just kind of like creepy. But it was funny because right after I watched The Birds, I was watching The Twilight Zone, and he's got a really great episode called And When the Sky Was Opened. And I watched it, I think it was like the next day after we watched The Birds, and he's in that, and he's so good. He's so good in that episode. And part of that episode, because what it is these three pilots, like they crash, and it turns out that they're each disappearing. So he's panicking because he sees what's happening, but nobody believes him. And his emotion in that episode is really good, but then he's so kind of sterile in The Birds.
Yeah, it comes across so bland. It's like I imagine Hitchcock over-directed him. you know.
I can see over directing. And then also there's the thing where Hitchcock was crazy about Tippy, so he wouldn't allow the cast and crew to talk to her.
Yeah.
So he kept her apart. And when you've got two leads, they're supposed to have some chemistry and then be fighting together, yet they're not allowed to try and have their own relationship aside from the movie, is damaging.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. It just, it leaves the viewer questioning more than they should. Because
Right.
they're, in the movie, their characters do kiss and they are romantic, even though they really don't know each other and they're fighting off, War of the Birds. But it doesn't feel real. It feels more like a romance built because of the situation rather than a romance built that is fighting the situation.
Right.
So after the big explosion, we get back to Mitch's mom's house. We get back to Lydia's house. Well, spoiler alert, Annie dies. Spoiler alert, she's just laying out on our front lawn, totally dead. So we don't have to worry about the ex-girlfriend anymore. But
wait, and actually that part, because she's dead and she's laying out there and he just takes off his blazer and puts it over her.
Yeah.
And I was watching it with Carlos and he's like, take her inside. And he's like, is he really just going to leave her body out there?
what I found so weird about that scene is that him covering her, I mean, true crime like I know true crime. We watch a lot of documentaries and we read a lot about true crime. The act of clothing a body is a very emotional, very repentive sort of thing that people do to the dead bodies. They'll redress them, they'll bathe them, all that weird stuff. So watching him do that to her, it was almost as if he was finally acknowledging the pain that he brought to her. I know I'm reading a lot into this.
Yeah, but there's so much in these Hitchcock movies. I don't think that it's out of the question to be seeing that.
Yeah, because even if you look at the two of them is it Cynthia's? At the little girl's birthday party, he is nowhere near her at all. And we know that they had a relationship. They had an actual honest-to-God relationship. And the only time they're actually close together is that moment when he's putting his jacket on her.
Right.
It's the only time where you understand that there was a little bit something more-ish.
Yeah, and it's like, if I had an ex-boyfriend move into my town to be near me, I'd be like, hey, go away.
Yeah.
Stop
talking to my mom.
Yeah. It's like, pack your bags and move away. And the fact that he doesn't do that with her, it's almost like he enjoys the attention.
Yes. And that's what I think. I think that's the crux of it, is that he enjoys being surrounded by he enjoys collecting the birds. He enjoys having these birds around him. And he's put them in a cage, which is this island. This island is his, and he's going to put all of his birds there.
Damn it, Mitch.
Mitch, you're so problematic. If you were Cary Grant, maybe. But you're not. Because also, the way he says dear and stuff to his mom, when Cary Grant would say it, it's more like a teasing little, cutesy thing. The way he says it, it's very... It lends itself more towards the Oedipus situation than it should, in my mind.
Yeah, it's like, because I have a higher voice, people will say sweetie or dear unnecessarily to me, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
But
You're also in Florida. That's like a southern thing.
That's true. Cary Grant's kind of like my grandma. If he called me dear, it's fine, because I don't think it's coming from a place of misogyny. I think he'd probably call his dad dear. I feel like that everybody's dear and a darling. But when Mitch says it, ugh. bleh.
Yeah, when Mitch says it, it almost makes my skin crawl just a
Yeah.
little bit. And it's that sort of thing where you're kind of like, man, I wish your eyes would get pecked out by a bird. Like, stop saying it. And, well, I'm also, like, very standoffish towards Mitch in general because the fact that he's never attacked when he's on his own. He's never attacked when he's just with the guys. It is when he is in his home trying to protect the women. It's the only time he's ever attacked.
Right.
So what does that say about the birds? Like, because when you look at it, like at the end, he's able to leave the house, walk through the entire patch of birds, and get inside the car, no problem. It's the only time we actually ever see him alone with a big bunch of birds, too.
Yeah, they're not attacking him. Ay, ay, ay.
Yeah.
What do you think about the ending, too? Because he gets to the car and he listens to the radio, and the radio says that the bridges are closed.
Yeah. And that just about everyone in the town has left.
So if they're driving out, but the bridges are closed, where are they driving to?
The restaurant, since they can only go one way down the road. No, but that is a good question. I don't know if they're actually... This is where I think it might follow the book. I wonder if they actually even survived this situation, because if they have no place else to go, what happens next? I mean, but also you could look at it in a different way. Like, Melanie is constantly attacked by birds throughout this entire thing. And it's not until the end, really, when she's attacked in the attic and when she really accepts... Here's where I'm going to get real deep. We learned at the beginning of the movie that Melanie doesn't have a relationship with her mom at all. Mm-hmm. You know, her mom left her when she was very, very young, left her entire family. She doesn't even know if her mom's alive anymore. And it's not really until the end of the movie when she accepts the love of another mother that it seems all the attacks seem to stop.
Right.
Because they all manage, like, she gets attacked in the attic and then Lydia takes care of her. They wrap her up, they, you know, take care of her wounds. And then when they're all walking out to the car together, she's leaning on Lydia. And when they're in the back of the car, there's that moment where she looks up at her and, like, snuggles into her like a daughter to a mom. Mm-hmm. And no bird attacks, nothing at all.
Man, Hitchcock's fucked.
Yeah. Hey, Hitchcock, you got some mommy issues you want to talk to us about? Like, what's up?
Yeah.
Like, and that's something where I'm like, when you see that at the end and then you look back at the entire film, it's like, I think the mom is the crux of the entire situation. I think the birds are just a manifestation of... It's like when you meet somebody's parents for the first time, you know, and it's like the defenses are up and you have to work your way through it, you know?
Yeah, and there's a thing, too, where his mom doesn't like her. Yeah. So they make it a point where she even says something like, oh, you like me now? And she's like, I'm not sure. So she has to go through this damaging experience in order for the mom to accept her.
Yeah. It's like, you're never going to be good enough for my son until you put your life on the line for him.
It's weird too, looking at the next movie Hitchcock does, which is Marnie, because there's that whole thing where she feels that she's not loved by her mom in that one either. So the whole, spoiler alert for Marnie, but the whole ending is her saying, like, you know, why did you never love me? And
Yeah. I think Hitchcock has mommy issues.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
You have Psycho. Now that's some real mommy issues. Then you have this. Then you have Marnie. I
mean, even when you look at, like, stuff like Rear Window, where it's cool because Grace Kelly kind of ends up being the hero in the last,
Yeah.
quarter of the movie. But the way that she's being watched by him and the way that he is, he can't walk. He's kind of at her. She's the one taking care of him.
Yeah.
So she is very maternal over him throughout that movie.
Yeah, she's fulfilling the mom role.
Ah,
Like, I have a feeling that if we were to go back and look at just about every one of Hitchcock's films, we would find this sort of trope hidden in there somewhere.
yeah.
Because it's now becoming more obvious to me.
I know.
Like, the more we talk about it, the more I'm like, I don't want this to be a thing anymore. I'm like, I love Hitchcock. Please stop. Please.
But it's one of the things I like about it, even though part of me is grossed out when I watch the birds because I'm seeing what is happening to Tippy. At the same time, it's so fun and interesting to pull apart the meanings behind his choices and what he's presenting on screen.
Yeah, and what I find so interesting is how it really shaped a lot of other films too. When you think about it, like the end of the birds, we still have no real explanation for anything, just like in the short story, and you can see that sort of carry over into other major Hollywood films, like Night of the Living Dead. You basically just swapped out birds for zombies.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, and once again, no one believed them that it was happening. And then you have like Jaws. Why did Jaws attack? Nobody knows.
And I don't care. I just like him to attack.
Yeah, and it's the terror of not knowing. It's like even more modern films like Cloverfield, which I guess now that's not super modern. I mean, that was like, 10, 15 years ago. But now we have a monster. We don't know where it came from. We don't know why it's here. And we don't even really get to see it.
The movie, too, just from a special effects standpoint, where they're mixing real-life birds, puppets, mechanical birds, and then this overlay of, like, matte birds on top of the actual film it still looks good. I mean, there's parts, especially with you can tell some of the puppet ones.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's still it still holds up, I would say.
Yeah, well, they had a Disney animator work on this film.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either until I was really watching the credits.
Huh.
And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And then I paused it and I did a lot of Googling afterwards. I was like, are you kidding me right now?
Yeah, one of the big guys that worked with Disney of iWorks, he helped with the special effects of adding in the birds over the film.
Yeah, which I still think is so crazy that there's such a big Disney connection between them. Like, that's so funny.
Yeah, no, it's super cool though.
Yeah.
It's really like the prototype for CGI.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, that's the thing that we really don't give Hitchcock a lot of credit for, is pioneering a lot of insane things. I mean, first of all, we've never seen a toilet flush before on film until Psycho, which to me is still baffling because it's like, don't people go to the bathroom? You hear the toilet sound, but you never see a toilet. And then you have this where it's like modern day, like you said, modern day CGI being performed on cells for a film. It's crazy what he was able to pioneer.
Well, he's cool because his career is so long, going back to the 1930s, and he has so many of these masterpieces that come in the 1950s and 1960s, which is a big transition time frame for Hollywood because you're still holding on to that Hollywood system and you're not quite yet into the freedom of the 1970s. So he was trying to find ways to break the rules while still under big production funding. So things like, the like each frame of Psycho, he had to like cut down into seconds to get it past the censors. And then there's like the story with Notorious where you've got the kiss scene
Mm-hmm.
where they weren't allowed to have a kiss for what, longer than like 5 seconds or something like
Yeah.
that. So instead, it's this long scene of them kissing, but they just like give each other little kisses. So he was just like so smart in finding ways around these bullshit rules, and it's before the new Hollywood stuff.
Yeah, for a problematic director, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And that's just like Tippy said, he was a genius of the time. Like, you can't fault, like, that's the thing. I'm sure there are a lot of other people who are going to say some things about other directors, especially one who I will not name, who thinks he is a superstar director.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I think you know who I'm talking about. We've had conversations. I think you know who I'm talking about, where they try to, circumnavigate the rules a little bit to try and, make things their own. God, I want to say his name so bad. I'm not going to. But really, it all goes back. I don't think anyone ever did it the way Hitchcock did. And everybody else can think that they're a genius, but he truly paved the way for everyone else to do what they're able to do. Like, there's that whole meme where it's like blank walked so blank could run.
Yeah.
Hitchcock was already jogging so that other people could match his pace. Like,
Yeah, and I like that. Obviously, he has so many movies, and a lot of them are very similar, but when you get into peak Hitchcock, every single time he picked a project, he wanted it to be different than the last. So he does something like this epic North by Northwest, which is just one of the biggest movies, period,
Yeah.
that you can watch. Then he turns around and does Psycho, which is a small budget, a small set, less people. It's just like 3 locations. It's not 3 locations, but 3 areas. And then he turns around and does The Birds. It's like he kept wanting to challenge himself and do something new.
Do you have a favorite Hitchcock film?
Every couple of years I change my favorite. I think at the end of the day, I'll always probably say Rope, just because it's so good. It's so good.
Rope is. I have 2 favorites, and Rope is one of them. Like that,
What's the other
long
one?
shot in Rope gets me every
yes.
time.
Yeah.
The other one's Rear Window.
Yeah.
I am, especially living in New York, where I can look out my window and I have a courtyard, and I can, see. Honestly, you can see in other people's windows all the time. Spoiler alert for my neighbors, I see you. It's one of those movies that every time I watch it, you see something new.
I just remember I watched that movie for the first time in high school. I remember watching it and going, I wonder how they filmed these sets and then merged them together. And then that moment of realization, we're like, no, this is one set.
Yeah.
They must have built this entire apartment complex in a set. And like looking it up, it's mind-blowing. In every movie, there's some sort of technical achievement that he has made.
Yeah. It's the other thing that's so good about Rear Window, and it relates back to The Birds, is the isolation nature of it. We're isolated with this one group of people in The Birds. We don't know how everyone else is dealing with it. Like, we don't see Annie die. We don't know how she dealt with the birds on her own. We don't see, anybody else. We don't see the farmer die. We're just stuck with Mitch and his mom and, everyone there. And it's just like Rear Window. We are getting glimpses of other people, but we're never really seeing their lives. We don't know what's really going on. And that's what adds to the suspenseful nature of it. Like, we don't know what's happening except for what's happening in this one room.
Right.
I do love that movie so much.
Yeah, Rope is definitely up there. I love Psycho. I mean, I watch Psycho probably every year and a half. But then I really love Vertigo. I love
Oh, Vertigo's
Notorious.
so
Notorious is
good.
great. There's a lot.
Yeah, it is. I would say it's really hard to, like, I say I have a top two, and it's never like in competition. It's like they share first place forever in my heart. But every other film underneath is just a hodgepodge of everything. Like, there is no second place. It's just the other films of Hitchcock.
See, I'm like sitting here thinking, and even going back to his early stuff, the 39 Steps.
I love
That's a
39
great
Steps.
movie.
Ugh.
I love that movie. That's one of the early Hitchcock films, but you still see Hitchcock in it. Like, there's a part early on where this woman finds the dead body, and when she screams, it's the sound of a train whistle.
Yeah. It's
So good.
perfect. It's perfect. Like,
Are we going to turn this into a Hitchcock podcast?
yeah, all Hitchcock all the time.
Yeah.
Hitching up with Christina and Nikki.
I love it.
Well, no, like, we can't turn it into a full-on Hitchcock podcast, because then we'd actually have to talk about him.
Yeah.
And while we've touched on how problematic he is in relation to the birds, I don't know if I could handle going into his entire,
Yeah.
thing.
Because I've read, I don't know if it was this year or last year, but I read and I have another one to read too, but it was like the making of Psycho. And even with how kind of gross he is, I felt myself feeling bad for him at the end, just because of how broken he was from not getting the recognition that he deserved, and how it kind of stopped him from making more of these masterpieces, this artwork.
Well, that's how Tippy described him, too.
Mm-hmm.
She said that he was just a broken man. And
Yeah.
that's, I can't think of a worse thing to say about somebody. Like,
Yeah.
calling somebody broken is just so, it's just so depressing. I mean, it doesn't redeem any of the things that he did, but it's
No.
still just like, it kind of like hurts inside, you know?
I have complicated feelings for him.
Yes.
But I mean, let me ask this, because I feel it's winding down here. Which one do you prefer, the short story or the movie?
Oh, that is a good question. Honestly, I really like both. I like both. They're companion pieces, I would say. I don't think that's because it's definitely not a direct, from page to screen.
It's not.
We did it. It's not direct. I enjoy Tippy in The Birds. I mean, you remember, I dressed as her one year for Halloween. I love...
One of my favorite costumes.
It's
my
one
two
of my favorite
costumes you've ever done were the birds one, and then when you did the Titanic.
Oh, yeah, when I was all blue for Titanic. Yeah. I was a Titanic victim. I love those. I'm going to bring those back.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it again. I know new people now who haven't seen them. But honestly, I think I'm leaning towards the short story just a little bit more than the movie.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
There's something about that short story that just was frightening. Like, even if you take away the whole, like, constant talk of Russia, the way it ends, the way the short story ends versus the way the movie ends, it was just like, and there's nothing, and then you have to sit with that. Like, you have to sit with that feeling, like, what is going on?
I mean, we just gushed about the birds and Hitchcock for a while, but I find myself, like, if I'm sitting on Tippy's crazy motorboat and I've got the short story and the movie, and they're both getting attacked by birds and I can only save one of them, I feel like I'm going to save the short story.
Same. I love that you're on Tippy's crazy motorboat. Listen, if I'm breaking into somebody's house and I'm going to leave either the movie or the short story.
Yeah, it's not a faithful adaptation. He basically just kept the birds part.
Yeah.
And that's not the reason why I would pick the short story. I just think that the short story it's so scary and it's so good.
The short story lets you imagine a lot. Like, every book lets you imagine a lot more. You see it all inside your head. But the description of some of the things, I'm still like, my skin still crawls when he talks about how he was nailing the dead bodies of the birds onto the
Yeah.
boards to protect the house. Like, that is something that I had to imagine in my head, and it will forever be there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing I can do to take that away from my mind now. It's like there's nothing that can cleanse this for me.
It lives there now.
Yeah, rent free. I'll allow it. Well, I hope that this was a wonderful palate cleanser to the mistake of the first episode.
Oh yeah. This is way more of Christina's alley than that bullshit was.
Yeah, no, same. Oh God, my anger is still there. Like, once again, I thought I was coming into 2021 as like a new woman, like leave behind all my problems in 2020. Oh, but we're starting over. We're starting anew.
Yes.
And I think the first episode was a fake out, an early April Fool's.
A fake out.
We're doing it, and we're doing it now. But we're gonna barrel on through into February, a month of love. Another month where we're all probably gonna stay home. Christina, you want to tell the people? What we're giving them for February?
Yeah, we're doing a book that I've never read and a movie I have never seen, which is
Same.
Waiting to Exhale.
Same. This is gonna be a good one.
Yeah, I'm excited to have two female authors back to back.
Yeah, and this is our big change from 2020 to 2021. Because in 2020 it was very male heavy,
Except for Louisa
Louisa
May
May
Alcott.
Alcott. Except for our girl Louisa.
Oh wow, I didn't even think about that. So yeah, 2021, it's three female authors back to back.
Yeah, and
Oh wow, I didn't even realize that we did that.
I didn't until you said that we were gonna have these ones back to back, and I was like, interesting. We're changing things up just a little bit, and yeah, I am very excited to go into this with no expectations.
Same.
I haven't spoken to anyone who's read the book or watched the movie, so I've got.
Yeah, the only thing I know
nothing.
is that a car gets set on fire in the movie.
I love it. I love it already. Revenge. I hope it's revenge.
I wonder what those birds did to her.
Yeah, for February, our month. Yeah, what those birds did to her. We're bringing the birds back in February, you guys. Wow.
Oh, well, this has been so much fun, and I hope that you don't get attacked by any more birds.
Well, I'll let you know. You guys will all be the first to know. Unless my eyes get gouged out. Then Christina's going to have to find a new host. Could you imagine? Could you imagine your eyes getting gouged out and you're the co-host of a podcast where you have to read a book and watch a movie?
Oh, yeah, because I was going to say you can still talk, but I guess that's a little problematic for reading.
Yeah, this is like, well, I guess I could do an audiobook, but then how am I supposed to watch the movie?
Dang.
This is like the Twilight Zone episode where he locks himself in the bank vault. And it's like, oh, I can read all the books I want, and then my glasses break. Except my eyes get gouged out by birds.
I will describe what's happening for you.
Yeah. Christina, tell me what she's wearing.
She's wearing a green suit, and guess what? She will be for the next 2 hours.
I'm sorry, there is one exception to that. She does wear a nightgown.
Yeah, she does wear a nightgown, but I do like a suit.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Christina, for another fun
Thank you. Yeah.
adventure. And yeah,
Going on
hopefully,
this journey with me.
yeah. Listen, I'll go on any journey with you, especially if there's fire and birds and if the director's got mommy issues. And thank you all for listening to this one. Um, thanks to Jesse for having to listen to this when we're done, for being our sound engineer. And, we look forward to you guys joining us in February. Another fun-filled adventure.
We will see you then.
Bye.
Bye.